Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. Good to have you all here this evening. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the House of Seven Beggars, therefore it must be Zeyde's Story Corner. That's right, Zeyde's Story Corner. So, we continue. You're the Master of Prayer. Yeah, that's right. We've been reading the Master of Prayer for, well, not counting Purim, about 30 weeks. Yeah, about 3 weeks just on this story. It is a long story. And, yeah, that's right. We weren't on last week. Well, kind of were. Yeah, that's true. We kind of were. Last week we did at this time, we did the Megillat Esther reading, which you more or less helped with. Well, I like to say helped. Yeah, I bet you would say you helped. Yeah, okay. So, anyway, so we're glad to have you all here. Especially of those of you who are joining us because you are in self-quarantine or whatever because of the Mishgash going on out there in the world today. And we're glad that you're with us and hope that this will be something that you will come back and see us again. We're a friendly group. Yes, we are a friendly group. So, let's get you on your camera. Yes, let's do that. Okay. So I will we'll turn that camera off. We're not going to do that. We're going to turn that camera off. But the fingers. All right. Okay. So let's get you on your camera. There I am. I am a good-looking Zeyde, huh? Okay. So, just as we have been doing, I am going to back up a little bit and refresh your memory about the story where we left off the last time. And we go on from here. Okay? It's good with you. It's good with me. Okay. So, the Master of Prayer studied with his people. He opened their eyes and revealed to them how they ought to pray to God. They had been righteous before, since they had prayed all the time, but the Master of Prayer made them into great saints. He sent a letter to the warrior, telling him of his good fortune in finding such people, who made him their king. Meanwhile, the people of the country of wealth carried on in their folly and their rituals, and the time the warrior had granted them was running out. They were terrified, and they stepped up their rituals, offering sacrifices, burning incense, and devoting themselves to their prayers. Then they once again decided to send for help to the country whose inhabitants were as gods, being so very rich. Remember, if they were rich, the richer they were, the higher they were. Okay. They still believed that this country could save them. Just sounding more and more like Helm all the time. Yeah, could be. Yeah, speaking of Helm, we have a something to announce later after the break. Yes, we do. Okay. So, they sent messengers to this country, but these messengers lost their way and came upon a man walking along with a staff. Now, this staff was inlaid with so many precious gems that it was worth more than all the riches of all their gods put together. it was probably worth more than the riches of their own gods and the gods of the country to which they were going, all added together. The man's hat was also inlaid with jewels, and it too was exceedingly valuable. The messengers immediately fell down before him, bowing and prostrating themselves. According to their folly, his great wealth made this man a god above all gods. God forbid. In fact, he was the king's treasurer. If you think that is special, he said, come with me, and I'll show you real riches. He led them to the mountain and showed them the king's treasures. They immediately fell down again and bowed and prostrated themselves to this God of gods. However, they did not offer him any sacrifices, since they thought that he was a great God. They would have liked to have sacrificed themselves to him, but they had been strictly forbidden to do this. Those who had dispatched them had been concerned that, were they to do so, none would reach their destination. One would find a treasure on the road, another would go to the water closet and find jewels there, and they would start sacrificing themselves until no one was left. The messengers decided that there was no point in going on to the country to which they had been sent, because this man would doubtless be able to help them even more, since they thought that he was a greater God than all the others. They begged him to return with them to their own country. He liked the idea and went with them. When they returned to their country, the people were overjoyed to have acquired such a great God. They had no doubt that he would be able to help them. Yeah, right. The king's treasurer, like all the counselors of the king's court, was in fact a righteous man. He was very pained by the foolish customs of the country, but he could not yet turn the people from their evil ways. Nevertheless, he issued a decree prohibiting all sacrifices until order was restored. When they began to tell him about the warrior who was threatening the country, he, like the master of prayer, said, "Perhaps this is the warrior I once knew." He left the city and went to the warrior's camp, and he asked one of the sentries whether he could see the warrior. The sentry went to ask permission, which the warrior gave. As soon as the treasurer went into the warrior's presence, they recognized each other and rejoiced and wept. The warrior said, "Our worthy master of prayer was here too, and he has become a king." The treasurer told him about all the places he had passed close to where the king and his counselors had been, and how the master of prayer and the warrior were the only two he had not encountered. Then the two discussed the country whose people had sunk into folly and corruption because of their lust of money. The warrior told the treasurer, as he had the master of prayer, that the king had once told him that whosoever sank into the lust for money could not be freed of it except by going along the road that leads to the sword. The treasurer persuaded the warrior to grant them some more time. They agreed upon certain signs with which they could keep in touch with each other, and they parted. When the treasurer returned to the country, he began to exhort the people, telling them how bad their path was, and that they had been led astray and corrupted by the lust for money. He could not move them. So deeply entrenched were they in their evil ways. Nevertheless, they had heard so many reproofs from the master of prayer, and now from the treasurer too, that at last they said, "Very well, then. If we are really in error, please free us of it." But they did not mean what they said and had no desire to abandon their folly. "I can tell you what to do about the warrior," the treasurer told his people. "I know all about the warrior's strength and from where he derives his power." And he told them about the sword, the source of the warrior's power. "I can lead you to the place of the sword," he said. "By going there together, we shall be able to overcome him." In his heart, however, the treasurer really hoped that by going on the road that leads to the sword, they would be freed of their folly. His advice was taken, and he set out with a group of their leaders on the road to the sword. These men, who were considered gods, adorned themselves with ornaments of gold and silver, that they might see their wealth. The treasurer sent word to the warrior about his mission and his hope of finding the king and his counselors along the way. The warrior answered that he wished to join them. He disguised himself so that none but the treasurer would know who he was, and joined the company that was going to the place of the sword. Then they decided to tell the master of prayer as well, and he said that he would join the company. Before he set out, he bade his people to pray to God for the success of their mission, that they would find the king and his companions. He had always prayed for this, And now he bade his people to do the same. He had written a special prayer for this. The master of prayer joined the treasurer and the warrior, and there was great joy at their reunion, rejoicing and weeping, as on earlier occasions. The three of them traveled for a long time together with the gods of the land of wealth until they came to a certain country. They asked the guards stationed at the border, "What kind of country is this? Who is your king?" The guards answered that at the time of the great tempest, when the people of the world were divided into sects, they had decided that the true purpose of life was wisdom. They had taken a great sage to be their king. Recently, they had found another, even greater sage, who was unique in the depth of his wisdom. Their own king had abdicated, and they made the greater sage king. It sounds as if this is our own sage, the three travelers agreed, and they asked if they could see the king. Well, permission was granted, and as soon as they entered his presence, they saw that he really was the king's sage. Then there was great rejoicing, but they also wept, because they did not know how to find the king and his family. They asked the sage what had happened to the hand. He replied that it was in his possession, but since the great tempest that had scattered them all, he did not wanted to look at it, for it belonged to the king. Nevertheless, he had engraved a copy of it on stone, that he might make use of it in time of need. Then he told them that after the great tempest, that he had wandered around, and on his travels he came across the places where all of the king's men, except the three who were with him now, had been. He wandered until he found this country, whose people had made him their king. For the present, he had to govern them according to their own ideals of wisdom, until the time would come when he would be able to guide them to the real truth. The counselors discussed with the sage the country whose people had been led astray by money. If we were to cast out and be scattered for no other reason than to restore that country to the path of truth, it would still have been worthwhile, they told each other. Each of the other sects had chosen its particular folly. This one, honor; that one, murder, and so on, and had been misled, and all had to be guided toward the real truth. Even the sect that pursued wisdom had not attained the true goal, for its ideas were secular and heretical. It was easier to free them from their folly than the others, but it was most difficult of all to move the people of the land of wealth from their wrong ways. The sage added that he too had heard from the king that it was possible to free a man from any folly except the lust for money, and that the only release from this was by going along the road to the sword. The sage decided to join their company, and the four of them set out, together with the gods of the country of wealth, and reached another land. "What kind of country is this, and who is your king?" they asked the sentries. After the great tempest, they were told, the people of this country had agreed that the purpose of human life was speech. They had found an orator, a master of many tongues, and made him their king. But later they had come upon an even greater master of the art of language, both bard and orator. Their own king had abdicated in his favor, and they had made him their king. "This must surely be the king's bard," the fourth counselor said, and they asked if they might see the king. Well, permission was granted, and when they came into his presence, they saw that he really was the king's bard. Their rejoicing was great, but they also wept for the lost king. The bard, too, joined their company, and they continued their search, hoping to find the others. They saw that God was indeed helping them, and they were finding more and more of their comrades. They ascribed their good fortune to the master of prayer, by virtue of whose prayers the reunion was coming about. They reached another country, and there too they asked, "What kind of country is this, and who is your king?" The guards told them that they were of the sect that believed the purpose of life was to be drunk and merry. Speaking of Purim, they had searched for someone who was always happy, and they had appointed a drunkard to be their king. Later, they had come upon a man sitting by the sea of wine, and he pleased them more. They thought that he must surely be a great drunkard, and they made him their king. The champions then asked to see the king, and the permission was granted. When they entered the presence of the king, they saw that he was the king's friend, and the sea of wine by which he had been sitting had flowed from the edges of the bard. Here too there was great rejoicing and weeping, and the friend joined the company. They reached another country and asked the guards, "Who is your king?" The guard replied that their ruler was a very beautiful woman. The people of this country had agreed that the purpose of life was to populate the world, and that beauty helped to fulfill this. At first, some pretty woman had been their queen, but later they had come upon a woman of incomparable beauty, and they had made her queen. The counselors realized that this queen must surely be the king's daughter, and asked to see her. Well, permission was granted, and when they came into her presence, they saw that she really was the king's daughter. The joy of the reunion cannot be imagined. "How did you come to be here?" they asked her. And she told them that when the great tempest had snatched the precious child from its cradle, she had run after him in pursuit, but had not been able to find him. Her grief was great, and her milk flowed and flowed until it formed a sea. Later, the people of this country had found her and made her their queen. The counselors' rejoicing was great, but they also wept bitterly over the missing child and over the king and the queen, of whom they had heard nothing. Now, however, this country had a king, for the daughter was reunited with her husband, the warrior. The daughter asked the master of prayer to stay in her country for a while in order to cleanse its people of their pollution, since they regarded beauty as the ultimate goal, and they had sunk into terrible debauchery. Furthermore, they had made their lechery into a religion. Then the counselors set out in search of the others, and they reached, you guessed it, another country. "Who is your king?" they asked, and they were told that he was a 1-year-old. The people of this country were of the sect that had decided that their king should be a man who had a great amount of food, but not the food of ordinary men. They had made a certain rich man their king, but then they had come across someone sitting by a sea of milk. He pleased them very much. For all his life, he had fed only on milk, and he had never eaten the food of ordinary men. They made him their king, and because he lived on milk, like an infant, they called him a 1-year-old. Okay, so we are going to take our break here, and when we return, we shall find out if this week they will find all of their companions. So please, everybody stay tuned. We will be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Glad you all stuck around. Okay, we forgot to do a few things at the beginning. Yes, we did. We did forget that. Let's go and see who is in the chat room, huh? Okay, let's see. We have Kelsey Lynn. We have Miriam. We have Simon. We have David. We have Donald. We have Ethan, my buddy Ethan. Good to have you here, Ethan. And let's see, again, Donald and Veronica. Okay, I think we got everybody. Let's check, huh? Okay, let's check. Let's scroll up here real quick and make sure we didn't miss anyone. Marshall is here also. Okay, I think we got everybody. And you who are watching in the background, we are glad you are here. Even if you don't come into the chat room. But you are here. So that is something. Okay, so now we also forgot something else. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. So, as we have been doing, we've been featuring a book every week. Yes, the Moshe, Rabbi Moshe Steinerman. Yes, yes. And this week is the last book. And the reason that we almost forgot it, yeah, this is the one we are reading on Shabbat. Yeah. So this one is called A Journey into Holiness. This is part of the Rabbi Moshe Steinerman I Love Torah series, which he is making available for, let's get a good shot there. Yes, he is making this available for cost. The books are only about $7 a piece, and if you can't afford the $7, you can get it on the Kindle for 99 cents each. They're wonderful, wonderful books. Good Shabbat reading. Yes, very good Shabbat reading. Okay, so just go to Amazon and put in I Love Torah series, and it'll bring up all the books, and you can get whichever ones you want. So hopefully you'll get the whole series, because they are worth having as part of your library. So, but thank you very much. You're welcome. Okay, shall we get back to our story? Yes, we probably should. Okay. So, the counselors realized that the king must be the lost child, and they asked to see him. Well, permission was granted, and when they came into his presence, they saw that he really was the child. He recognized them too, though he had been only an infant when he was snatched away. He had possessed such extraordinary wisdom even at birth that he remembered them. There was great rejoicing at the reunion, but they also wept, for they still knew nothing of the whereabouts of the king and queen. "How did you come to be here?" they asked the child. He told them that after the great tempest had snatched him away, it had dropped him at a certain place where he had lived on whatever he could find. Eventually, he had come upon the sea of milk, which he understood must have flown from his grief-stricken mother's breast. He had stayed there, living on the milk, and then the people of this country had found him and made him their king. They set out again, and then they reached another country. "Who is your king?" they asked. And they were told that these people were of the sect that had chosen murder as the ultimate goal. At first, a certain cutthroat had been their king, but later they had found a woman sitting by a sea of blood. They decided that she must be a great murderer, and they made her their ruler. The counselors asked to see her, and the permission was granted. When they came into her presence, they saw that she was the queen, who had wept until her flowing tears had made a sea of blood. There was great rejoicing at the reunion, but weeping too, for they still knew nothing of what had become of the king. They reached, you guessed it, another country. "Who is your king?" they asked. The people answered that since they thought that the true purpose of life was honor, they had chosen a very honorable man as their king. Later they had come upon an old man sitting in a field wearing a crown. He must be a very honorable person, they decided, for even when sitting in a field, he still wore a crown. And they made him their king. The counselors realized that this man must be their own king, and they asked to see him. Well, permission was granted, and when they entered his throne room, they recognized him. The human mind cannot possibly imagine the joy at that reunion. However, the foolish gods who had been traveling with the counselors had no idea why everyone was so happy. Now that the Holy Company, the king, and all the members of the court was complete, the messenger prayer was sent out to all the countries to correct them, to purify them, and to bring them out of their folly. They had the power to do this, for the other kings had conferred their authority upon him. The warrior talked with the king about the country whose people had fallen so deeply into idolatrous worship of money. "You once told me," he said, "that men can only be released from the lust of money by taking the road to the sword." "Indeed, that is true," said the king. "On the road to the sword, there is a side path that leads to a mountain of fire. on that mountain crouches a lion. You guessed it. A lion that, when it is hungry, goes out and preys on flocks and devours sheep and cattle. He takes no heed of the shepherds, who makes much noise and throws stones at him. The mountain of fire is quite invisible. Another side path leads from the road to the sword and reaches a place called the kitchen. Here, there are many kinds of food, but no fire. The foods are cooked by means of pipes and channels from the mountain of fire, which is quite a long way from there. The kitchen cannot be seen from the road, but it can be detected by the birds that hover over it. By the flapping of their wings, these birds can stir up the fire or quench it. They keep the flames at the proper heat for each of the different dishes. Go then, and lead the people of the country of wealth to the kitchen. Make sure they walk against the wind, and that the smells of the food reach their nostrils. When you give them that food to eat, they will cast off their lust for money. The warrior did as he was bid. He took the leaders of the country of wealth, all of whom were regarded as gods in their own country, and brought them along the road. Before these leaders had left their country with their treasurer, those who remained undertook to accept whatever was done in their name. The warrior led them along the road to the sword, up the side path to the kitchen. At first, he took them against the wind and the odor of the food that reached their nostrils. They pleaded with him to let them eat these delicacies. Then he turned them about and took them parallel to the wind, and they cried out, "What a dreadful stench!" He turned them around several times. Each time they begged for food or complained of the stench. "Do you not see there is nothing here that smells bad?" the warrior said. "It can only be you yourselves." Then he took them to the kitchen and gave them food. As soon as they had eaten, they began to throw their money away, for they realized that it was the source of this stench. It stank like excrement. Ethan, that's poop. They were deeply ashamed, and each dug a pit and buried himself in it. In that place, money was most disgraceful of things, and the greatest insult one could hurl at someone was, "You have money." Whoever had more money, his shame was the greater. None of the leaders of the country of wealth would show his face to his companions, much less to the warrior. whosoever found that he still had a coin, even if it was just a penny, destroyed it or threw it away. Then the warrior came and raised them out of the pits. Come with me, he said. You no longer need fear the warrior, for I am he. The leaders asked him to let them take some of the foodstuffs back to their country. They themselves already found money revolting, and now they wanted the whole country to be freed from the lust of money. It was the special quality of these foods that whosoever ate of them found money revolting. So, the warrior granted their wish, and they brought the food back to their country. As soon as their countrymen tasted it, they too immediately began to throw away their money and to bury themselves in the earth in great shame. The wealthiest people and the gods felt the greatest shame. But the lowly people, the beasts, the birds, were also ashamed to have considered themselves worthless just because they possessed no money. The people threw away all their money, their gold, their silver, and they sent for the master of prayer, who gave them penances and told them how to correct their ways and purify them. And the king ruled over the whole world, and all the men turned to God. Blessed is he, dedicating themselves to Torah, prayer, repentance, and good deeds. Amen. May this be his will. That was a good story, huh? Okay. Took 3 weeks, but we finally got there, huh? Okay. So, I think we have enough time to, well, maybe we start this new story next week, huh? So we can talk about other things, huh? Okay, so you got something else up your sleeve? Yes, I do. Yes, after we finish this book, when we do, yes, we have another book. When we do, and what is that? It is called let's see. Now I forgot what the book was. Okay, let me do that, and we'll go back here. And it is called The Silly World of Helm. The Silly World of Helm. Oh, good stories. Yes, this book has all the stories of Helm. There are a lot more than you would think. And when we finish this book of the stories of Rabbi Nachman, we are going to start on the Silly World of Helm. This book going to be a great book. I'll tell you, I guarantee it for you. Okay. So, we are just about out of time. Next week, we will continue with our next story, which is called The Clever Man and the Simple Man. So, until then, my dear friends, we shall simply say, Laila Tov.